Hello out there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cole Anderson. Today we're changing pace quite a bit and delving into the world of tango with Astor Piazzolla's wonderful Milonga del Angel. I am indebted to Dr. John Mortensen for this transcription, which is far more faithful to Piazzolla's original ideas than any other piano score that is readily available of this work. Mortensen went back to Piazzolla's original score to work out this arrangement, and honestly, I don't think it could be bettered. Quite correctly, I believe, Mortensen doesn't attempt to exactly imitate the kind of freely improvised style that was so characteristic of Piazzolla's manner of realizing his own melodic material. Instead, he just puts the basic outlines down, and I take the liberty of inserting whatever free alterations seem to be appropriate to me. Occasionally, these alterations were inspired by one or another of Piazzolla's concert or studio recordings. So now, some backstory on Piazzolla, the king of the new wave in tango called Nuevo Tango. Tango that was brought away from its song and dance roots into the world of the concert stage. Indeed, the style of tango that Piazzolla coined is an intricate combination of elements from tango, jazz, and also European classical traditions. Piazzolla had come to Buenos Aires as a young man in the 30s and joined one of the foremost tango bands of the time, that of Aníbal Troilo. He was one of the foremost band leaders and bandoneon players at that time in Argentina. And although Piazzolla was very successful as a bandoneon player, playing standard tango music of the time, he was also very ambitious about the idea of composing concert music. He really wanted to be a composer of original music himself. Unfortunately, his technical capabilities as a composer were very limited, and it wasn't until he had his fateful meeting with the Polish pianist Arthur Rubinstein sometime in the early 40s that he had an opportunity to receive the technical training he would need to accomplish his goals. Rubinstein recommended him to Juan Jose Castro, who in turn directed him to study with the rising young composer Alberto Ginastera, with whom Piazzolla studied for some 6 years. With Ginastera, Piazzolla wrote standard concert music, music for orchestra, piano, etc. And one of these pieces, a 3-movement symphonic work called Buenos Aires, it was Opus 15, won him the coveted Fabian Sawicki Prize, which allowed him to study in Paris. Incidentally, this early piece, although by no means characteristic of Piazzolla's later, greater works, already reflected his interest in trying to incorporate the sounds of tango and his instrument, the bandoneon, into concert music. So I do link to a performance in the description box of this early piece if you're interested in taking a listen to that. A word about the bandoneon as well, it is not the same as an accordion, so be careful not to mix those up. I'm sure it would probably insult many a bandoneon player to make that mistake. In fact, it's actually much more complicated to play, and it has a very peculiar and very expressive kind of sound. It's capable of a great deal of variety of tone, and Piazzolla utilized all this to its full extent in his extremely expressive later music. Well, anyway, back to Piazzolla's story. In Paris, Piazzolla went to study with the legendary composer and teacher Nadia Boulanger, who was friends with Stravinsky and taught a whole host of famous composers, including Leonard Bernstein and Aaron Copland. And it's very lucky for us that Piazzolla did go and talk to Nadia Boulanger. He showed her his concert music to start with, including his piece that had won the prize, and she complimented his work on its technical skill, but she felt that there was some kind of indefinable quality that was missing from this music. When she asked him what other music he played besides the compositions he showed her, he could hardly bear to admit that he made a living at home playing tango on the bandoneon. He was kind of ashamed of it. Boulanger's reaction was quite surprising, though, to the young composer. She asked him to play a tango of his own for her, which he did. He played something on the piano. And she said, "That is the real Piazzolla right there. Don't ever lose it." And this was a revelation to Piazzolla, who completely changed his approach after studying with Boulanger, and instead of trying to fit the tango into a classical mold, he used the tango as the heart and soul of his style, and instead incorporated elements of technique and structure from the classical tradition into it. And this began Piazzolla's odyssey to develop the Nuevo Tango. along the way, the highly spontaneous and improvised approach of jazz musicians was also very influential on his style. In particular, the idea that originated with Gunther Schuller of the third stream. This was a term that he coined in '57 to describe the idea of a fusion between jazz and classical traditions. So taking together all these disparate elements, we arrive at Piazzolla's style. At the heart of this style is the rhythm and melodic spirit of the tango. These melodies and rhythms are structured in remarkably subtle and elaborate forms that owe much to classical models. Harmonically, they're also far more refined and esoteric than classical tango. So the Milonga del Angel, for example, that I'm playing here, is composed in directional tonality. In other words, it ends in a different key than it begins. And this is set up by harmonic subtleties in the B section of the piece that I show in the video. On top of all this is layered that much more improvisational approach to melodic realization than what was typical in classical tango to that time. This was, of course, drawn from jazz. And what we're left with is music of stunning sophistication and beauty, and music that has an emotional core that at its best is really overwhelming in its effect. I mean, this music is truly one of a kind. There's nothing quite like it anywhere. Now, the milonga itself is another kind of a dance closely related to the tango. It's not exactly the same. Piazzolla is playing with the genres here, actually, because the typical milonga is actually quite upbeat. It's usually danced with a much quicker step than the more seductive tango. However, here we have a very slow, meditative milonga. The only thing that is maintained is the basic milonga rhythm throughout. This milonga is also part of a three-part series, actually. So the first part is this Milonga of the Angel, then there's the Death of the Angel, and finally the Resurrection of the Angel. And this series of pieces was originally composed for a play by Alberto Rodriguez Muñoz called The Tango of the Angel. And in the play, this angel comes down to a tenement house in Buenos Aires and attempts to heal the spirits of the people living there, but ends up being killed tragically in a knife fight. But the promise of resurrection is contained in the last piece in the series of three. And this was actually quite a turning point for Piazzolla's popularity. Even those among his fellow country people who disliked what he was doing with tango. It was a hotly contested topic, and some people thought that it was just sacrilege what he was doing. But even people who were against his overall direction were very impressed by the effect that Piazzolla's music made in this play. So I've linked to my favorite performances of the original series of pieces in the description box. It's a performance from the 80s with Piazzolla's second quintet, and I also provide a link to John Mortensen's own live performance of his transcription as well, if you're curious to hear that. So again, I'm really indebted to him for making this transcription, so a big thank you to Dr. John Mortensen. And of course, thank you to all my loyal supporters on Patreon. I really couldn't do it without you. If you haven't already done so, please do consider becoming a financial patron, either through Patreon or you can make individual payments through PayPal as well. You can find the links for both of those sites in the description box. Just click on the links and follow the prompts to make your donation. These donations are really what makes it possible for me to continue bringing you this content. So thank you again, enjoy the performance, and see you next time.